Hello and welcome to the BYU Family History Library webinar series. We're glad you could join us today. I'm Bryant and I'll be your host for this webinar. Please make sure your microphones and web cameras are disabled during the presentation to provide for a smooth recording. If you have technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box and I can address your concerns. You are welcome to use the chat box during the webinar for comments and insights. However, all questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Our next webinar is going to be on the 15th next week, Wednesday at 5:30 p.m., Demystifying the Family Search Catalog. And that will be with Rachael Rifkin. If you'd like to access a previous webinar, please visit our webinar index on our website or search on our YouTube channel. All of our webinars are recorded and uploaded by the following Monday for your convenience. We also post links to recordings and other updates on our Facebook and Twitter accounts. For today's webinar, we are pleased to hear from Rachael Rifkin, who will be giving a presentation on family resilience. Rachael Rifkin is a personal historian whose work focuses on using storytelling and similarities to bridge the gap between generations, cultures, and backgrounds. She has written for Good Housekeeping, Parents Magazine, 23andMe, Ancestry.com, MyHeritage, and more. Her newsletter, Theory of Relativity, is about the similarities that run in families and what we can learn from those similarities. And just as a side note for this presentation, this webinar is going to be a little bit different. It's not going to have any presentation slides, so we're just going to see Rachel's video, but it's going to have writing and active participation where the audience, when Rachael invites you to, can share and unmute their microphone, turn on their video, and share their answers or their thoughts over Zoom. So with that, we'll turn the time over to Rachael.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So we've all been through a lot of stuff recently. One thing that helps me during this time is thinking about my ancestors. Just the idea that we are alive and here means that thousands and thousands of our ancestors had to live and make it through all these different hardships to get to where we are in our lives. And although that doesn't necessarily make it easier for us now, it does help in terms of maybe comforting a little bit and reassuring us that we can make it through these hard times. This also makes it a really good time to talk with our relatives about past hardships they've had and how they're weathering things now and how we're weathering things now. It's important to share both sides to share. One of my relatives that really gives me comfort during this time is my grandfather. When I was 26, I found a Korean War memoir he wrote when he was 27. Rather, the memoir was based on letters he wrote to my grandmother when he was 27. So it was really awesome to be able to get to know him as like a peer. And so I know a lot about what he did during that time period to get through the Korean War. So in his letters to my grandmother, he did complain a lot. You know, it's not easy being at war, obviously. He talked about the really bad heat during the summers, the cold during the winters, the boredom, a little bit about worrying if he was gonna, make it through. And some of the things that he did to help him when he was feeling anxious were obviously to write letters. That was a big thing. Writing to my grandmother really helped him a lot. And she would sometimes send him books that he was interested in reading, and so reading was really good. A huge thing for him was listening to symphonic music. He would talk about in the letters of how it had helped him escape his reality, and it would also send him back home in a way, because he would think about the last times he had listened to symphonic music at home as well as in person back in like Michigan and New York. Let's see, and he would communicate and talk a lot with the fellow soldiers, and they would joke around. Joking around was a really important thing. So I actually invite you guys now, we're going to start getting into the writing right away, to think about hardships that your relatives, your older relatives faced. Are there any relatives that talked about their past hardships? What did they do to get through? So I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes to maybe jot down some notes, and then I'd love to hear from a couple of you to hear about what your ancestors did to make it through hard times. All right, I think it's about time now. Is there anyone who would like to actually share with us and turn on their audio and turn on their video?
I just remember my mother teaching me so much from her experience in the Depression. And one of the things that I noticed is that as the family prospered, the garden shrunk. And so by the time I was a teenager, we had like 2 rows of vegetables instead of a full garden.
Hmm. Thank you so much for sharing. That's really interesting. Kind of measuring getting away from hardship by a slowly diminishing garden. Dan, did you want to share? You said you had a war letter idea.
I served for a year in Thailand in 1969 and 70 during the Vietnam War. My wife and I wrote letters, but it was about a 2-week turnaround time from some time something happened until you got to hear about it.
Mm-hmm.
We kept all those letters, and while we haven't started to really memorialize them into our family stories yet, we have them there. And so if we don't get to it, the kids can. In 2006, our son served for a year in Afghanistan. They had much better communications then, and he had access to a satellite cell phone. He could call his wife once a week and call us periodically, maybe every month or so, and we could chat with him directly. Far superior communications. Unfortunately, I doubt there was ever any record made of those long-distance conversations. We have letters, at least, for our time period. I doubt our son or anybody nowadays would have that opportunity. So if you have someone who's trying to do long-distance correspondence by any modern technology, think about turning on the record button.
That's such a good idea, and such a good point, because nowadays it is easier to communicate, but we don't end up usually with those records of what happened, and then you kind of lose that history. I mean, one thing you can do besides recording, which is a great idea, recording the conversations, is also email. And you could be old-fashioned, and I don't even want to call it old-fashioned to do letters. I mean, nowadays it's exciting to get a letter in the mail because it's such a treat almost, because we don't really get like real handwritten letters anymore. But thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's really great. Writing letters, communicating, talking with your family during times of hardship really help. So now is there anyone else who would like to share before we move on to the next one? Well, I don't hear Jenny right now, so I guess I'll just share what she said. Oh, she doesn't have audio. Okay. During World War II, my mom left her family in Ohio, joined the Lady Marines, so went to the East Coast for basic training, and then to San Diego to run the projector for training the Marines returning home. That's interesting. She met my dad, and then they married and lived near his family in Las Vegas, Nevada. So then for the next 50 years, she lived away from her parents, siblings, cousins, and all her high school friends. I thought this was difficult to be so far away. Yeah, oh my gosh. You know, I think about that kind of stuff too, where it's like you leave your whole family, and then you have to rely on, you know, writing letters, or nowadays the email and stuff like that. Thank you so much for sharing. Peter, you said you would love to share. Hi, Peter.
Hi. Yeah, hi. I remember a story that from my parents. They got married in 1935. Pardon me, in 1930, and at that time the Depression was in full blast. Mm-hmm. And so my father had worked for Kennecott Copper, and then lost his job. And so he borrowed money, I think, from his wife's mom, and bought a recreational recreational park in a place in New Jersey, and worked on that, creating sites that could be rented out. And that was his depression baby. And eventually, that turned out really profitable. And then World War II started, and he got back and got a job selling metal products again. And the park was in the family until the late 40s, when my mother sold it to the campers.
Oh, that's so interesting.
So it worked out really nicely. If I might make a comment, one of the things everybody's thinking about memories that they could write something about. I hope they wrote the little memories down, because if you don't write memory joggers, what happens is the next slide you're going to put on, they're going to forget about all those memories. And that's I have an article on Family History Guide called Remembering Memories on that subject, and it really works. And I've used it for years now. And whenever I get a memory, I use, well, I'm a computer guy, so I put it on Evernote, as a matter of fact. And then I go back and then I write the stories. And I've written over 200 of them, just based on little tidbits of memories here, there, and everywhere. And it's been interesting to put some of them on trial, which puts them in a timeline.
That's really awesome. Would you mind going into the chat and sharing the article you referenced as well, so people have access to that?
Yep, I'll do that right now.
Thank you, Peter. That's a really good segue to explain a little bit more about what we're doing right now. We're going to be going through 2 more writing prompts that have to do with resilience. And what I really hope you do after the session is go back to it over time and fill in more information, more stories. And then please share them with people in your life, family members, friends, people like that. This is here for you to make sure you keep your memories and pass them down. So if there isn't anyone else that would like to share, we will move on to the next writing prompt. I wanted to share that from my own experiences, so we'll be talking about our own experiences getting through hardship prior to COVID and this fun year. Some of the biggest hardships, the biggest hardship I've had in my life up to now, besides this year, has been my mom dying when I was 32. And the things that helped me after that were things like I read a book by Joan Didion called The Year of Magical Thinking. It's a book about grief. I literally read that like in the first week after she passed away, and it really helped me process some of the things I was going through, because I was a little shell-shocked. Plus, in that book, Joan Didion talks about magical thinking, like you still kind of think that person's alive in a way. So you think, like in the book, she shared that she kept thinking about her husband's shoes, and she kept thinking about where were her husband's shoes. She needed to make sure to find them before he used them again. And she would be like, but okay, that's right, he's not going to use them again. I don't need to be thinking about that. And for me, something like that was when my mom's birthday came around, or Mother's Day. I would be thinking like, oh, I got to get something for her. And then I realized, oh, no, I don't. Which was, the holidays and birthdays are really hard. But as time went on, it helped me to realize that if I really wanted to, I could still get something for her, and maybe I would keep it. She loved turquoise, she loved chocolate. So around her birthday, I like to celebrate her life by getting those things, either chocolate or getting maybe something new that's like a turquoise ring or something like that, and really thinking about and celebrating her life. And speaking of, you could celebrate Dia de los Muertos / their birthday in the same way as Dia de los Muertos, in the sense that it really is about celebrating their life, getting out their favorite things, telling stories about them, making their favorite foods, and it's like in a way that they're still there with you. So those were some of the things that I did to cope with grief in those early days, and then in the days and years to follow. So if you guys could take maybe just a couple minutes to jot down some thoughts on something hard that you've been through in your life, and what were some of your coping mechanisms and things that really helped you get through that hard time, and then we'll share again. Okay, it's been a couple minutes now, and I'd love to invite you guys to share, maybe a couple of you, your experiences getting through past hardships.
And I had a car accident, and she was killed, and I was almost killed, but we survived. And, you know, one of the things, some people get so depressed there, but I found that if I was so busy doing things and recovering from severe injuries, and I didn't have time to mourn. And the first thing that came to my mind when I woke up in the hospital basically was, I knew that my wife was dead, and I know she was okay because we had been sealed in the temple. And that settled me down. I said, it's okay. If this is a temporary thing, I'll be okay. And I never got really depressed. I remember her often, but not in a depressing way. And I've been involved ever since doing things and helping other people.
What kind of things have you been doing, and how have you been helping people, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, right now I'm a church service missionary at the Family History Library in Salt Lake City, which is currently closed, but I'm also the Ward Temple and Family History leader, and I have a garden that's 20 foot by 80 foot, and I give away vegetables to everybody in the neighborhood. So, you know, and plus I try to fit in a little bit of time to do my own family history. But I'm busy. I don't have time to get more depressed, or I'm just got too many things, too many projects going on that I just don't have time for that. And besides, you know, being depressed is a sort of a decision you make. And if you don't want to be depressed, then you decide, well, I don't want to be depressed, and figure out, well, what you can do to keep yourself from being depressed. And again, I've never really suffered from depression. Some people haven't. I know it's very debilitating. And I'm not quite sure how they go about it. But for me, it was just deciding I'm going to be happy, and I'm going to do is help other people and be busy and be productive. And I never even thought about being depressed. Now, that may not do any good for somebody who's like a family that has a lot of depression in it, because Again, I've never been depressed, so I have no idea what it is. But anyway, being busy and involved and helping other people, I think, is probably a good way of not being depressed, and also a good way of helping other, being helpful and creating all sorts of good memories, which you can then write stories about.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. I think whether you have depression running in your family or not, the getting active and helping other people tends to be a really positive thing for anyone. So I thank you so much for sharing that. And I find it really interesting how, everyone processes grief differently. I know for my dad, when he lost my mom, he said he would be just sitting in a chair looking at the wall if he started to actually date almost right away, which, I didn't have a problem with, and neither did my brother. I know a lot of people ask me afterwards, like, were you upset that your dad was dating? But we were not one of those families that would get upset about that. But he started to, he looked up old girlfriends and ended up marrying, a year or two ago, he ended up marrying the first girl he ever asked out on a date. So, getting back out there right away was one of his ways of coping. So anyway, thank you again, Peter, for sharing that. Is there anyone else that would like to share how they've gotten through past hardships? Peter adds that dating when you're 85 isn't easy. Maybe not. Okay, well, if no one else would like to share, then I think we'll move on to the next one. So this one we'll be talking about what are we doing currently to get through COVID, get through this year in a positive way, if it's possible. For me, I have 2 young kids at home. One's about to be 5 and one's 3, and it's been difficult. My husband and I have been basically passing the kids back and forth throughout the day so we both can still work, and you don't get much time to yourself at all, and so much juggling going on. But I've learned a lot in these last few months about being more in the moment, and that's something I've been wanting to work on for a long time. Being less distracted all the time, less looking at my phone, that kind of stuff, and just being in the moment, especially with my kids, because they're young but they're growing up, and my kids especially have really taught me how to just play and you get through each moment by getting through each moment. So I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes to write down some notes, and then we'll share again ways that we've been getting through the current moment. And again, this is hopefully to help everyone hear, if you hear these suggestions, they might be helpful for you. And then, of course, writing down the memories is super important. So we'll be sharing things that have been helping you make it through the current times.
Okay.
Hi.
I unmuted. I just wanted to share that during the current period, since about February, I've been learning a new skill, learning to play the violin. So I practice every day for at least an hour and a half. And so it's taken a significant amount of time, but it's been very fulfilling and I've enjoyed it a lot. So, and anyway, for me, it's been learning to do something new that I hadn't had the time to do before.
Had you always wanted to learn that skill?
I play the piano and the organ, so I have a lot of musical background, but I had always wanted to learn to play the violin and just had never had the opportunity. And at 72, I thought maybe I can't learn a new skill, and it has been a challenge. But it's doable, and I'm enjoying it.
Are you seeing some progress as you're going along too?
Finally. It's been discouraging too, because the progress is slow, very slow. But I'm improving bit by bit.
That's so great. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
Cheryl, would you like to speak? Hey, Cheryl. Yes.
Yeah. So we were only about 3 weeks into our classes, and they shut all the classes down. And I was so excited about learning to quilt. I was making my daughter a quilt using the wedding fabric from when she got married, from her bridesmaids' dresses and her dresses and the groom's shirts. She had a themed wedding, and her theme were skulls and pirates. So it was a lot of interesting fabric. So anyway, that project got put on hold. And so then I moved into making face masks for myself and my family. So I've probably now made about 150 masks for people in my community and my family and friends. And I still have tons more to make, but I get burned out on making them, so I just have to take a break for a little while. So the other thing, I've been keeping a journal on the things that I do during the day or things that happen, some of the things that are on the news. I don't write every day because I was writing so faithfully and I burned out on writing. So, you know, now I'll go a week or so without writing anything, but I'll go back on my cell phone because I have my calendar on my cell phone, and I'll look at my cell phone and see what I did on that day. And if it was something important, then I'll make a note in my journal. And then finally, our swimming pool here, we live in a mobile home park, and finally they allowed our swimming pool to open. So now I'm going down every morning and I'm able to do water aerobics. There's about 3 ladies and we all meet down there at 10 o'clock and we do water aerobics. And we have to sign in, and we're only supposed to stay an hour, and there's only supposed to be at max 10 people, but there's only 3 of us at 10 o'clock. About 11 o'clock, the kids start coming down, but for an hour we have the pool all to ourselves. So that's really, really nice. And I live in California, close to Sacramento, but in a little town that's only maybe about not even 2,000 people. So it's a very small community. But the other thing I've been doing is watching tons of webinars and listening to Zoom meetings. I mean, I have been so busy. Sometimes I'll listen to 2 or 3 a day. There's so much educational things available to us through the different genealogy groups. And right now, they're all free.
Right.
So it's a perfect time for everybody to take advantage of these free webinars and these free talks because they're so educational. I've been so busy, I haven't been able to work on my genealogy. When this is all over, then I can start doing some work again. But I'm not depressed. I'm not bored. And then I have one more thing I'm doing. I signed up to do the 2020 census. So I'm also an enumerator. And we just finally last week got some assignments to go out and start doing the census. The part I'm doing is not where you go door to door. It's group homes where people are in their assisted living homes, or they could have Alzheimer's or other problems. They could be foster care places, things like that, where there's more than maybe 4 or 5 people in the home. So those are the types of places that I'm going to. So I do that in my free time. So that's what I've been doing during COVID, staying busy.
Thank you so much for sharing. I am super impressed with everything you're doing. It's like a 4-pronged approach, and it's so many different aspects of your life you're keeping busy, especially the mask making. I know a couple people in my life that are doing mask making, and they tend to find, you know, not only is it, you know, a nice skill to keep up and something to occupy your time, but it's, you know, it gives you a sense of purpose and you're helping people. Going back to that whole helping people thing, I mean, that really does make people feel good. And then learning new skills, and I'm just really impressed with you. I'm glad you're doing well. And I have heard from other people too that they're really busy right now, and so that's good. Some people are actually, I mean, I almost feel weird to say it, but enjoying this time. Yeah. And I think it is important to recognize that you can enjoy this time, because we are, and sometimes, and in some ways, we're being given the gift of time, and we're being given time to look at our lives and what was working before, what wasn't, what can we do differently. So is there anyone else that would like to share? Well, I just want to thank you guys very much for attending this webinar, and remind you one more time that please expand on the different the stories that you started on today. Please share them with the people in your life, especially if you have young kids in your life. There's a study that shows that when you learn family stories, especially stories that show family resilience, kids end up having higher self-esteem and are more resilient themselves when they get to look at how their family has survived and made it throughout the generations. So please, please, please keep sharing your stories, keep writing them down. So yeah, thank you very much again. And if you have any questions for me, we could do questions now, or if you want to reach out to me for whatever reason, my website, I'll type it in the group chat as well, is RachelRifkin.com. And my name is Rachael, Rifkin, RIF as in Frank, KIN.com. Thank
Perfect.
you again.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Yeah, if anyone has questions for Rachel right now, please post them in the chat box or feel free to voice them and unmute yourself. Okay. If there's no questions, then we'd just like to thank everyone for joining us today. Thanks again, Rachel, for the great webinar.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just a reminder about our webinar next week on the 15th at the same time on Wednesday, Demystifying the Family Search Catalog with Rachel Derenthal. So we hope to see you next time. Thanks everyone for joining us and have a great day.
Bye. Bye, everyone.